two Chinese technical divers challenge the absolute deepest underwater cave in their country, crushing down at a terminal depth over 100 meters. One diver's air tank inexplicably runs completely dry. They panic, instantly sharing a single remaining tank, but that surviving air supply only buys them 3 to 4 minutes. Right on this razor edge between life and death, one man suddenly shoots straight up like a missile. His fate instantly vanishes into the dark. This is exactly what we are tearing apart today. The April 18th cave diving catastrophe. China currently holds a massive underground network, featuring 10 subterranean rivers stretching beyond 80 kilometers. 7 of those massive arteries run right through Guangxi. You can absolutely call Guangxi the ultimate ground zero for China's subterranean rivers, and the single county of Duan claims 2 national extremes at once. The absolute longest underground river, and the deepest underwater cave. The longest one fractures into a massive river system, spreading out like a sprawling, submerged tree. It links one roaring main channel with 12 violent tributaries, stretching out to roughly 241 kilometers in total. It remains the longest underground river currently mapped in China, but the true feature making Duan brutally unique is its terrifying cluster of karst skylights. Explorers have ripped open over 300 of these submerged sinkholes across the county, and among this massive swarm of flooded pits, the Jiuduan skylight stands out as the ultimate legend. Underground, several sloped shafts violently intersect. Divers plummet primarily through the north and south entrances, riding 2 rock channels that merge down at 110 to 120 meters. Below that, they fuse into a single throat, a bottomless abyss where the light officially dies. Right now, map limits hit a crushing 277 meters, though total depth plummets well beyond 300 meters. Veterans call it the Mount Everest of China's underwater world. It stands as the deepest accessible underwater cave ever probed in Asia. In 2010, 2 Chinese tech divers, Wang Yuan and Wang Tao, punched into the Jiuduan skylight for the first time. These guys share years of heavy friendship, and operate as a highly synchronized dive team. In that exact same year, they teamed up with a few others and forged WD, China's very first technical diving organization. They built it specifically to explore and protect those untouched, alien underwater caves across China where no human had ever breathed. After their first strike down the shaft, the pit completely obsessed them. They hammered out multiple back-to-back dives, hunting for the true horizontal main tunnel of this subterranean river. Jiuduan skylight rapidly mutated into a holy grail for global divers. Fast forward to 2012, French cave diving Phantom Pierre brought his crew to Duan, shattering the Chinese cave diving record at 121 meters. After that, elite divers swarmed in globally every single year. Hit March 2014, the undisputed king of global cave diving, French diver Pascal, alongside Finland's ice diving queen Mia, shoved the Jiuduan depth record all the way to 164 meters. They even dragged the main guideline through the North Cave, pinning it straight down to the 160-meter mark. Right at the dawn of that exact same year, Wang Yuan and Wang Tao started brewing an even deeper assault. Wang Yuan heard the French push the limits even further, so he rushed straight to Guangxi, tracking down Pascal to extract heavy deep water decompression tactics. Returning home, the 2 men locked in a brutal target, dragged the Jiuduan guideline all the way down to 170 meters. April 15th hits. Wang Yuan, Wang Tao, and their crew locked down at Jiuduan. They engineered an aggressively tight plan. Every man strapped 4 heavy tanks to his body. You got the primary tank for the massive drop and maximum depth, the backup tank specifically rigged for the ascent, and pre-staged echo tanks anchored at 6, 21, 50, and 57 meters, hanging there to flush nitrogen during staged decompression. You start the drop breathing from a transition tank, sinking from the surface down to 75 meters. The second you hit 75 meters, you rip it off, clip it to the line, and retrieve it on the way back up. Then you slam the regulator from your main tank, plummeting straight down to 170 meters. The entire downward plunge only takes 20 minutes, but surviving the trip back to the surface requires bleeding off pressure slowly in the dark for nearly 4 agonizing hours. Because the depth crushes them and time runs impossibly tight, the 2 men agree on a fatal shortcut. They will swap their own tanks on the way down and up. 0 buddy checks in the middle of the run. They only plan to verify each other's gear when grabbing those highly toxic, oxygen-rich deco tanks, because breathing extreme oxygen at the wrong depth triggers violent seizures and drowning in mere seconds. But they completely failed to calculate the trap. Skipping the buddy checks meant, if panic causes one guy to forget a tank switch, the other guy remains entirely blind to the mistake. Over the next few days, they hammered through several practice drops, tearing apart every single detail of the execution. April 18th, exactly 3 p.m., both men breach the water. Wang Yuan spears ahead, leading the drop. Wang Tao handles marking the route, stabbing directional arrows into the line, to clearly point out the exit vector, preventing them from swimming deeper by mistake on the return. Support diver Zhou Pei holds his position at 20 meters, waiting. The initial drop runs flawlessly, sinking to 100 meters. Visibility violently collapses to under half a meter. They tear through the silt, hitting 120 meters. They halt, executing a strict buddy check, confirming all systems green. They plunge further to 164 meters. Wang Tao sticks to the mission, placing marked arrows directly onto the guideline. Wang Yuan pushes deeper, probing the tunnel's trajectory, bottoming out at exactly 166 meters, holding that black void for about 1 minute. Both men ignite their ascent. By now, they have burned 20 21 minutes underwater, rising back up to the 130-meter mark. Visibility clears back to 2 meters. Wang Yuan reaches out to grab the guideline, only to realize the line has completely vanished. The clock leaves them zero margin to handle a crisis. Fear doesn't even get time to process. They initiate immediate action. Wang Yuan leverages the slanted, angled rock terrain, hugging the cave wall, blindly spiraling upward. Roughly 2 or 3 minutes burn away. Dead center in the tunnel, his hands finally strike that dangling lifeline. But this violent scramble costs Wang Yuan a massive amount of unexpected air. The second he secures the rope, his primary tank is totally dead. He frantically switches over to his own backup tank, ascending to about 120 meters. He suddenly catches a frantic flashlight beam violently shaking below. Looking straight down, Wang Tao trails closely behind, signaling that his tank is completely empty. Shock instantly slams into Wang Yuan. They carry the exact same gas volume. How could it vanish this fast? Instinct takes over. He shoves his primary regulator straight into Wang Tao's mouth. Both men begin ripping air from a single tank, kicking upward together. Mid-ascent, Wang Yuan scans his remaining pressure gauge. The cold math hits him. At this crushing depth, feeding 2 panicked, hyperventilating men, the gas dies in 3 or 4 minutes max, and their closest stage deco tank remains impossibly far away. Wang Yuan crushes the gauge against his chest. Death grips the guideline with one hand, grabs Wang Tao beside him with the other, and swims upward like a madman. They finally drag themselves up to 90 meters. The tank is violently screaming out empty. Only 15 meters separate them from the life-saving deco tank. The exact second Wang Yuan turns his head to look back, Wang Tao suddenly acts like gravity completely releases his body. He shoots straight upward, fast and lifeless. Wang Yuan instinctively snatches at him, missing the grab. When he jerks his head back up, the water above him sits totally empty. The main regulator falls right out of Wang Tao's mouth, drifting slowly down into the dark. Experts later tore the timeline apart, concluding Wang Tao likely blacked out right in that microsecond, losing total motor control, triggering that wild, uncontrollable ascent. The entire horror unfolds in 1 or 2 seconds. Wang Yuan snaps into reaction mode, snatches the tumbling regulator, and chases the rope upward for a dozen meters. Still no sign of his partner. Air is dying. Visibility remains absolute garbage. He brutally forces his brain to calm down. One glance at the gauge reveals almost zero gas remains. He has no choice but to swim to the 75-meter mark and crack open his transition tank to survive. The moment Wang Yuan secures his air, he violently kills his headlamp, plunging his eyes into absolute pitch black, hunting for any trace of Wang Tao's light. Nothing but crushing darkness. He traces the guideline back down. He has conquered this specific depth 5 times before. It should feel like his own backyard. But right now, the rock feels alien, like a completely different planet. Minutes burn away searching, and the used tank in his hand is bleeding dry again. He is forced to swap to his next deco cylinder. He absolutely refuses to touch Wang Tao's stage tank hanging at 75 meters. Wang Yuan later confessed he held on to this naive, desperate thought. If Wang Tao somehow fights his way back, that tank needs to stay right there waiting for him. He swims up to 57 meters, locking into his own personal deco tank, fully knowing that breathing this gas past 66 meters unleashes severe oxygen toxicity. He still dives headfirst back into the abyss. Only one raw thought occupies his skull right now. Either I find Wang Tao, or I die down here with him. Plunging deeper, Wang Yuan's consciousness severely fractures. Reality feels like a hallucination. Hitting 90 meters, his brain replays the terrifying loop of Wang Tao drifting away. He nearly blacks out on the spot. Ultimately, sheer animal survival instinct violently drags him out of the abyss. He throws the entire decompression plan straight out the window, rocketing upward with zero regard for his safety. He just wants to find Zhou Pei in the shallows immediately and dump the horror of what just happened. Ripping up to 21 meters, he finally spots the glow of support diver Zhou Pei. Wang Yuan signals that Wang Tao has vanished. Shock completely paralyzes Zhou Pei. Zhou Pei refuses to swallow this brutal reality. He plunges down the line completely alone, attempting to hunt down Wang Tao's trail. The second Wang Yuan releases the tension keeping him alive, his entire physical system collapses. The cave walls begin spinning out of control. He grabs a rock tightly. The world flips upside down. This aggressive, chaotic yo-yoing through the water column has completely shattered his decompression cycle. Lethal nitrogen and helium bubbles are expanding violently inside his body. Imagine a heavily shaken bottle of soda violently twisting the cap off. Bubbles literally detonate inside his veins. This is decompression sickness, and it kills. Finding zero trace, Zhou Pei returns to Wang Yuan, immediately initiating rescue protocols. Both men silently realize the nightmare. Wang Tao is never coming back, and Wang Yuan is currently bleeding out on the edge of death. If his brain scrambles so hard that he fails to lock in his depth, the second Zhou Pei leaves him, he dies too. So Zhou Pei holds the line. Wang Yuan signals Zhou Pei to push him back down, sinking to 36 meters to force a deco stop, before physically dragging Wang Yuan upward, level by level. Zhou Pei repeatedly shakes an unconscious Wang Yuan awake. They suffer through this hell for over an hour, before finally breaking the surface. A decompression schedule meant to take 4 hours, Wang Yuan only executes for roughly 150 minutes. He delivers a fragmented, rapid debrief to the crew, before rushing straight to the hospital, hunting for Wang Tao. The French cave diving squad operating in Duan integrates straight into the search and rescue ops. But mixing customized deep water gas takes hours, pushing the recovery dive to the very next morning. April 19th, morning hours. The French team breaches the water. The first wave quickly locates Wang Tao inside a 51-meter horizontal offshoot tunnel. An underground current likely dragged his body there and wedged him in. Soon after, the second extraction wave burns roughly an hour, physically hauling Wang Tao and every single deco tank strapped to him back to the surface. His mask remains perfectly strapped to his face, but the regulator sits completely out of his mouth, arms resting horizontally, body completely undisturbed. Zero signs of panic or struggle. The crew rips into his gear to check the tanks. The exact backup tank Wang Tao was supposed to switch to sits entirely untouched, flawless. It remains practically full, tearing the failure down later. The dive community locked onto a universally accepted theory. During this descent, they radically underestimated how extreme depth poisons the brain. When the rope vanished at 130 meters, massive psychological terror hit Wang Tao, flooding his brain with heavy narcosis, causing him to completely forget the tank swap. He relentlessly breathed off his dying primary tank, never executing the switch to his backup system. He literally sucked his main tank bone dry, tricking his narcotic brain into believing he was totally out of air. And because they strictly agreed to skip buddy checks to save time, nobody ever verified his fatal mistake. This exact oversight triggered the desperate gas sharing and the lethal, uncontrollable rocket to the surface. 1 year later, Wang Yuan and the WUD crew drop back into the Jiuduan skylight. They lock in a mission to permanently anchor a memorial plaque for Wang Tao inside the cave. Watching your closest brother die right in front of your eyes permanently scars you. Wang Yuan entirely abandoned extreme deep cave diving after that day, but this time, he forces himself back into the dark, hitting a depth of 63 meters. Wang Yuan releases the memorial plaque from his hands. He watches it glide slowly down the guideline, sinking straight toward the zone where Wang Tao died, fastened right next to the exact same knot the two of them tied together years ago. Thanks for watching. We will see you in the next one.